There are stories that lie dormant in the archives of history, like sleeping giants. They're not in your textbooks. They're too strange, too uncomfortable, too human. These are the tales that prove reality is far more inventive, more audacious, and frankly, more insane than any fiction ever written. I'm here to wake those giants. Together, we're going to open the files that have been gathering dust and look directly at the moments that defy all logic. If you like stories in this format, support this cycle with a like and write in the comments which city you are watching us from. This will inspire us to open new archives. Story number 1. The lie that built an empire on paper. Imagine a world lit only by fire and faith. A world where the vast majority of people can't read, where the written word is a form of magic, a direct line to God, and a single yellow document could hold more power than 1,000 swords. This is Europe in the long, dark centuries after the fall of Rome.
Power wasn't just taken by force. No, it was given. It was justified. It needed a story. And the church had the best story of all. It was called the Constitutum Constantini, the donation of Constantine. A simple document, a piece of parchment that smelled of ink and time. It told a beautiful tale. The great Roman Emperor Constantine, the first to embrace Christianity, was struck down by leprosy, a terrible disease. In his desperation, he was healed by Pope Sylvester I, and out of gratitude, out of sheer world-shaking piety, Constantine bequeathed, well, everything. He granted the Pope and all his successors dominion over Rome, over Italy, and over all the western regions of the empire. He essentially handed them the keys to Europe. Think about that. Not a loan, a gift. Forever. For centuries, this document was the ultimate trump card, a holy weapon. Whenever a king or an emperor questioned the Pope's authority to meddle in the affairs of state, to claim land, to crown rulers, and to depose them, the Vatican would simply unroll this ancient scroll. Look, it's written right here, in the hand of Constantine himself. God's will, certified by the greatest emperor. Who could argue with that? Nobody. That's who. For 800 years, this piece of paper was the bedrock of papal secular power. It shaped nations. It started wars. It was as real as the stone walls of the Vatican itself. But then came the 15th century, a new age, the Renaissance, a time when men started looking at the old texts not just with reverence, but with curiosity, with a critical eye. A scholar named Lorenzo Valla, a man obsessed with language, picked up a copy. He read it. And then he probably read it again, a cold feeling creeping up his spine. Something was wrong. It wasn't the story. It was the words, the Latin. Honestly, you have to admire the sheer audacity of it all. It was like finding an email from Julius Caesar complaining about the Wi-Fi in his tent. Valla saw phrases and terms that simply didn't exist in the 4th century. The language was the Latin of the 8th or 9th century, the so-called Dark Ages, not the classical Latin of Constantine's court. He pointed out historical errors, contradictions. The forgery wasn't even particularly good. It was just old. And for centuries, nobody had dared to question it. Valla proved, beyond any doubt, that the most important legal document in European history was a complete and utter fraud. A lie. A brilliant, patient, world-shaping lie. Of course, power, once gained, is rarely given back just because the paperwork turns out to be fake. But the crack had appeared. The foundation was shown to be sand. It was a quiet little intellectual explosion, but its fallout would change the world. It showed that even the most sacred truths could be manufactured. And if a lie written on parchment could rule for centuries, what happens when the lie becomes flesh and blood? What happens when it sits on a throne and wears a crown? Story number 2, the Tsar who stepped out of a grave. Paper lies are one thing. They can be powerful, sure, as we've seen, but they are cold, abstract. Now, let's talk about a lie made of flesh and bone, a lie with a heartbeat and a crown, a lie that ruled a nation. To get this, you have to understand Russia at the dawn of the 17th century. It was a place unmoored from its own history, a ship without a captain. The ancient dynasty of Rurik had withered and died, leaving a power vacuum so vast it threatened to swallow the country whole. It was a time of famine, of suspicion, of brutal boyar politics. They called it the Smuta, the time of troubles. And at the heart of this chaos was a ghost story. Years earlier, the young Tsarevich Dmitri, the last true heir of Ivan the Terrible, had died under, well, let's call them mysterious circumstances in the town of Uglich. A tragic accident during an epileptic seizure, the official story went. A quiet assassination, the whispers said. But he was dead. Buried. A closed chapter. Until he wasn't. Suddenly, word trickles out of Poland. A young man has appeared. And not just any young man. He is well-spoken, educated, charismatic. He has regal bearings. And he claims to be Dmitri, the Tsarevich. Miraculously saved from his assassins and now, after years in hiding, come to claim his birthright. Think of the sheer monumental gall of this. To not just tell a lie, but to become it. To embody a dead prince. The Polish nobles, always looking for a way to weaken their Russian rivals, saw an opportunity. They gave him money, an army, and their blessing. Was he the real Dmitri? Honestly, they probably didn't care. He was a useful tool. But here's where the story turns from a political ploy into something almost supernatural. As this man, this Lized Dmitri, or false Dmitri, marched toward Moscow, something incredible happened. The Russian people, starved and desperate for a rightful ruler, for a return to normalcy, began to believe. Towns opened their gates to him. Soldiers defected to his side. He wasn't just a pretender anymore. He was a symbol of hope, a miracle. Then, the reigning Tsar, Boris Godunov, died suddenly, and all resistance crumbled. In the year 1605, the gates of Moscow swung wide open for the man who claimed to be a ghost. He was met with cheering crowds. The mother of the real Dmitri was brought before him, and in a moment of pure, unbelievable theater, she recognized her long-lost son and embraced him. That was it, the final seal of approval. He was crowned Tsar of all Russia. Let that sink in. A complete unknown, a probable runaway monk named Grigory Otrepiev, convinced an entire nation he was their resurrected prince and became their king. He is the only impostor in history to ever actually achieve this. Not just to make a claim, but to win, to sit on the throne. His reign, of course, was a disaster. He was too Polish, too Catholic, too foreign. He flouted Russian customs, and his Polish bride and her retinue treated the Kremlin like their own personal party palace. The whispers started again. This time, they weren't about a miraculous survival. They were about a devilish deception. The end came less than a year later. It was swift and brutal. A mob, incited by the boyars who had once supported him, stormed the Kremlin. He was killed, his body burned, and his ashes, so the story goes, were shot from a cannon in the direction of Poland, the land from which the lie had come. You'd think that would be the end of it, right? The impostor is dead. The story is over. But that's the thing about a truly great lie. It takes on a life of its own. Soon after, a second false Dmitri appeared, and then a third. The country had been shown that a ghost could rule them, and now it couldn't get the idea out of its head. A lie that powerful doesn't need a person to carry it. Sometimes, all it needs is a beautiful object. Something that glitters. Something everyone desires but no one can have. Like, for instance, the most expensive piece of jewelry in the entire world. Story number 3. The necklace that strangled a queen. A lie made of flesh can be killed. Its power, however immense, dies with a body. But a lie built around an object? Something of impossible beauty and desire? That's a different kind of magic. That lie can outlive its creator and bring down an entire world. Now listen, picture Paris, the late 1700s, a city of silk and filth, of powdered wigs and hungry orphans, and above it all, the glittering, isolated world of Versailles, where the monarchy was bleeding prestige like a patient in the hands of a bad surgeon. The queen, Marie Antoinette, was a foreigner, an Austrian. She was already unpopular, a symbol of everything the common person hated: extravagance, frivolity, a disconnect from reality. They didn't just dislike her, they were ready to believe the absolute worst about her. And that is the perfect soil for a truly devastating con to take root. In the center of our story are two Parisian jewelers. They have created a monster. A diamond necklace of such staggering, obscene magnificence that it was meant for a king's mistress. But the king died before he could buy it. Now they are stuck with this constellation of gems worth a staggering 1,600,000 livres, an amount that could feed a small city for a year. They are desperate to sell it. Enter our players. First, Cardinal de Rohan, a man of the cloth, yes, but dripping with ambition and vanity. He has fallen out of favor with the queen and would do, quite literally, anything to get back into her good graces. He is our mark. And then, in the shadows, is our artist, a woman named Jeanne de la Motte, a descendant of kings, but with a title as empty as her pockets. She is clever, she is ruthless, and she sees the cardinal's desperation and the jeweler's panic as a set of keys to the kingdom. The plan she concocts is a masterpiece of psychological manipulation. It's so simple, so elegant. She befriends the cardinal, whispering to him that she is a secret confidant of the queen, a trusted friend. She tells him that Marie Antoinette desperately, secretly wants that necklace. But she can't buy it publicly. The scandal, the expense. So she needs him, the loyal Cardinal de Rohan, to act as her secret intermediary. He wants to believe it so badly he can taste it. His return to power is finally at hand. Still, he hesitates. He needs proof. So Jeanne arranges it, a night meeting, in the sprawling, dark gardens of Versailles. The cardinal waits, his heart pounding. A figure, dressed in white, emerges from the shadows. He is told it is the queen. The woman hands him a single rose and whispers a few words of forgiveness and trust. "You know what this means." Then she vanishes. That's it. That's all it took. Of course, it wasn't the queen. It was a local prostitute Jeanne had hired because she had a vague resemblance to Her Majesty. In the dark, it was enough. The hook was set. The cardinal, now utterly convinced, signs the contract with the jewelers. Jeanne de la Motte takes possession of the necklace on his behalf and disappears. Her husband immediately takes the necklace to London, where it is broken apart, its magnificent stones sold off one by one. The greatest piece of jewelry in a generation ceases to exist. The fallout, when the first payment is missed, is catastrophic. The jewelers go to the real queen, who knows nothing. The cardinal is arrested in his full vestments right in the middle of the court. A public trial ensues, and here is the true, bitter poison of the lie. The court eventually acquits the cardinal, seeing him as a gullible, pathetic fool. Jeanne is caught and punished, but the public? They don't believe the queen. They refuse to believe she was innocent. Her reputation was already so toxic that this story of secret deals, of decadent jewels and nighttime meetings, seemed entirely plausible. They saw her as a villain who had entangled a cardinal and then thrown him to the wolves. The affair of the diamond necklace, a grubby little crime born of greed, became a national scandal that irrevocably shattered the illusion of royal dignity. It became one of the final, decisive sparks that would ignite the French Revolution just a few years later. A con artist didn't just steal some diamonds. She helped decapitate a monarchy. It's a chilling example of how a private lie can become a public weapon. But what if the lie isn't an accident of greed? What if it's a precision tool, forged in the shadows with one purpose: to bring down a government overnight? Story number 4. The letter that assassinated a government. We've seen how a lie can shatter a reputation. Now let's talk about a lie that acted like a political bomb, detonated with perfect timing to obliterate a government. A single piece of paper, appearing as if from nowhere, that changed the course of a nation in less than a week. Let's go to London. The year is 1924. The air is thick with coal smoke and a nervous, twitchy kind of energy.
The Great War is over, but its ghosts are everywhere. And there's a new fear haunting the halls of power, a fear painted red: Bolshevism. The Russian Revolution is still a fresh wound on the European psyche, and the idea of a workers' uprising, of a communist takeover, is not some abstract fantasy. It's the monster in the closet of every respectable politician. Into this tense atmosphere steps Britain's first ever Labour government. Led by Ramsay MacDonald, they are socialists. Not revolutionaries, mind you. They are men who believe in parliamentary change, in reform, not rebellion. But to their opponents in the Conservative Party, and to the fiercely anti-communist press, they might as well be carrying red flags and singing the Internationale. They are suspect. They are dangerous. The government is already on shaky ground. They've decided to formally recognize the Soviet Union. A scandal. They've also dropped charges against a radical left-wing editor accused of inciting mutiny. Treason. A general election is called. The political atmosphere is a tinderbox, and someone is about to strike a match. 4 days, that's all. Just 4 days before the nation goes to the polls, the Daily Mail newspaper publishes a bombshell. A letter. A secret, explosive document allegedly sent from Grigory Zinoviev, the head of the Comintern, the Soviet agency for exporting communist revolution, to the British Communist Party. The contents were pure political poison. The letter instructs British communists to prepare for a violent revolution, to mobilize sympathetic troops in the army, to radicalize the working class and turn the Labour Party into a tool for the overthrow of the state. It was, in short, a direct order from Moscow to begin the Civil War. And it directly implicated MacDonald's Labour government, suggesting they were the useful idiots paving the way for it. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. It was the public's worst fears, printed in black and white. A direct link between the party in power and the red menace they so dreaded. The Conservatives seized on it immediately. Labour was not just a party of reformers. They were collaborators, puppets of a hostile foreign power. MacDonald and his party were caught completely flat-footed. They tried to deny it. They questioned the letter's authenticity. But how do you fight a shadow? The story was too good, too perfect. It confirmed every suspicion, every prejudice. There was no time to conduct a proper investigation, no time to debunk it. The election was just days away. The result was a bloodbath. The Labour Party was crushed. The Conservatives swept back into power with a massive majority. A government was killed, overnight, by a single letter. And the letter itself? A forgery. Almost certainly. Historians now believe it was a fabrication, likely created by white émigré monarchists in Riga, people who had lost everything to the Bolsheviks, and then leaked to British intelligence and the press by conservative sympathizers. It was a perfectly executed piece of political sabotage, a black op, conducted not with guns, but with ink and paper. It's a stark lesson in how a well-crafted lie, deployed at the right moment, can be more effective than any army. It doesn't have to be true, it just has to feel true. But that was a lie meant to change a nation's direction. What about a lie intended to start a war? A lie built not just on a letter, but on a whole stack of official-looking documents that would lead the world's only superpower down a path of no return. Story number 5. The 16 words that launched a war. A forged letter can kill a government. A stolen necklace can kill a monarchy. But what about a lie that kills people? Thousands of them. A lie that doesn't just change a country, but redraws the map of the world in blood and fire. You have to remember the mood. The early 2000s. The rubble of the World Trade Center was still a fresh scar, not just on the New York skyline, but on the global psyche. There was fear, a deep, primal fear, and a powerful, burning need for certainty, for clear enemies and decisive action. The world needed a villain, a clear one. And Iraq was in the crosshairs. The problem was, while everyone felt Saddam Hussein was a threat, the concrete, undeniable proof of an imminent nuclear danger, a smoking gun, they called it, was proving maddeningly elusive. They needed something solid, something they could show the world. And then it appeared, like a gift. A set of documents passed between intelligence agencies. They weren't flashy, just dry, bureaucratic-looking papers, letters, memos. And they told a chilling story. Saddam Hussein's regime was secretly trying to purchase 500 tons of yellowcake uranium from the small African nation of Niger. Now, you don't need to be a nuclear physicist to understand what that means. Yellowcake is the seed of a nuclear bomb. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore. This was a receipt. It was the proof. This information, these Nigerian uranium documents, became a critical piece of the puzzle, a key justification for what was to come. It all culminated in January of 2003. The President of the United States, George W. Bush, stands before his nation for the State of the Union address, and he utters the fateful line. 16 simple words that would echo across the globe. The British government has learned that Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa. There it was, stated as fact, broadcast to hundreds of millions of people. The lie was now official. It was the truth. But here's the thing. Behind the scenes, in the quiet, fluorescent-lit offices of the intelligence world, the story was already falling apart. The CIA had sent a former ambassador to Niger months earlier to check out the rumors. His conclusion? There was nothing to it. The story was baseless. More than that, the documents themselves were almost comically fake. I mean, truly. They contained forged signatures of officials who had been out of office for years. The letterheads were wrong. The language was clumsy. One intelligence report later described them as a transparent, ham-fisted fraud. And yet, the narrative was too powerful. The momentum for war was too great. The convenient lie, however flawed, was more useful than the inconvenient truth. The invasion of Iraq went ahead in March of 2003. The documents were later completely and utterly debunked. An Italian intelligence source admitted to fabricating them, to essentially inventing the whole story. But by then, it was too late. The war had been started. The lie had done its job. It had provided the spark. This wasn't a deception for money or a throne. It was a lie that served as a casus belli, a reason to send a generation of young men and women to war. A deception so vast that its consequences are still shaping our world today. It makes you wonder about the very nature of truth. But not all grand deceptions lead to war and tragedy. Some, in a strange way, are born from a twisted desire to create wonder, to present the world with a fantasy so pure and so peaceful, you almost wish it were real. Even if it means dressing up farmers and hiding them in a cave. Story number 6, the gentle people who never were. After the grim reality of a lie that launches a war, let's retreat. Let's go somewhere beautiful, somewhere untouched. Let's talk about a lie that wasn't meant to destroy, but to enchant. A lie that offered the world a perfect, innocent dream. The year is 1971. The world feels complicated. The Vietnam War is raging. Politics is ugly. Cities are noisy and dirty. And deep in the dense emerald rainforest of the Philippine island of Mindanao, a discovery is announced that seems to wash all that away. A lost tribe, the Tassidae. The story was breathtaking. A small group of people, maybe 24 of them, living in caves completely isolated from the rest of humanity. They were, the world was told, a true Stone Age relic. They used stone tools. They wore clothes made of leaves. They had no words for war or enemy because they were a people of absolute peace, living in perfect harmony with nature. Can you imagine a more potent fantasy for the weary, cynical modern world? A real-life Eden. The man who introduced them to the world was Manuel Elizalde, a powerful Filipino government minister. He became their official protector, their gatekeeper, and he controlled the narrative completely. He flew in hand-picked journalists and celebrities, including people like Charles Lindbergh and the actress Gina Lollobrigida, for carefully managed visits. They would be taken to the edge of the forest, meet the gentle, smiling Tassidae in their leafy loincloths, and leave utterly mesmerized. The world fell in love. National Geographic ran a famous cover story. Documentaries were made. Books were written. The Tassidae became a global symbol of humanity's lost innocence. They were proof that, somewhere deep inside us, beneath all the layers of civilization, we were still good. Elizalde created a massive protected reserve for the tribe, and for more than a decade, he kept them sealed off from the outside world. No one was allowed in. He said it was to protect their pristine culture from contamination. It was a noble gesture, and a complete fabrication. The story holds for 15 years. Then, in 1986, the political winds in the Philippines shift. The dictatorship of Ferdinand Marcos, Elizalde's patron, collapses. Elizalde himself flees the country with millions of dollars from a foundation he'd set up to protect the tribe. Suddenly, the gatekeeper is gone. And a Swiss journalist named Oswald Iten decides to hike into the forbidden forest to see the Tassidae for himself. He finds the famous caves. They are empty. He then finds the Tassidae. They are living in nearby villages, in regular houses, wearing jeans and t-shirts. And they tell him the truth. They were never a Stone Age tribe. They were local farmers, members of known indigenous groups. They explained how Elizalde had persuaded them, cajoled them, and paid them to put on a show. He told them to take off their clothes, to move into the caves when visitors were coming, and to act out the part of primitive cave dwellers. He taught them the script. Why? The motives were likely a cocktail of greed and ambition. The story brought Elizalde international fame. It brought in millions of dollars in donations and grants. It secured a vast tract of land, rich in resources, all under his personal control. He hadn't just discovered a lost tribe, he had invented one. It was a strange kind of deception. It wasn't malicious in a violent way, but it was deeply cynical. It took real people and turned them into props for a fantasy. It exploited the world's desperate desire for a beautiful lie. This lie rewrote a small chapter of human anthropology. But what if a lie could rewrite the entire history of a nation? What if a single man with a trowel and a secret could add hundreds of thousands of years to his country's past, all by himself? Story number 7, the man with God's hands and dirty fingernails. A fabricated tribe is a living lie, a performance that needs actors. But what about a lie buried in the earth? A lie that you dig up with your own hands. A lie made of stone that rewrites the very origins of a people. This is a story about a man who didn't just find history, he planted it. For decades, Japan was in the grip of an archaeological fever. Every new discovery seemed to push the timeline of human settlement on the islands further and further back into the mists of prehistory. And at the heart of this incredible series of breakthroughs was one man, Shinichi Fujimura. He wasn't a university professor with a string of degrees. He was an amateur, a self-taught archaeologist who worked at a manufacturing plant. But he had a gift, a miraculous, almost supernatural talent for finding things. They called him Kami no Te, or God's hands. Everywhere Fujimura dug, he found treasure. Perfectly shaped stone tools, ancient dwellings, he was a national hero. His discoveries were stunning. Before Fujimura, the oldest known human sites in Japan were around 40,000 years old. But then, site by site, he began to shatter that record. He found artifacts that were 50,000 years old, then 100,000, 200,000. He kept pushing the date back, deeper and deeper into the Paleolithic era. His crowning achievement came in the year 2000 at the Kamitakamori site. He announced a discovery that was simply unbelievable, a collection of stone tools that were more than 600,000 years old. Think about that. It fundamentally changed the understanding of Japanese history. It meant that early humans, Homo erectus, had not just been in mainland Asia, but had crossed the sea to Japan hundreds of thousands of years earlier than anyone had ever imagined. Textbooks were rewritten, museums were redesigned. Fujimura's finds were a source of immense national pride. He was the man who had single-handedly given his country a deeper, more ancient past. He was meticulous. He was celebrated. He was trusted. And he was a complete fraud. The lie was so vast, so audacious, that no one in the academic establishment dared to question it. Who could argue with the man with God's hands? But a lie that big eventually casts a long shadow, and a major Japanese newspaper, the Mainichi Shimbun, began to have its doubts. The finds were just too perfect, too frequent. So they did what good journalists do. They didn't just listen to the story, they watched the storyteller. In late October of the year 2000, they set up hidden cameras overlooking the Kamitakamori excavation site, the place of his greatest triumph. In the dim pre-dawn light, they waited, and they captured it. The footage was grainy, but undeniable. There he was. Shinichi Fujimura, the archaeological hero of Japan, wandering through the site alone. He reaches into a bag, pulls out carefully selected stone artifacts from his private collection, and methodically digs small holes, burying them in the exact spots where his team would be discovering them just a few hours later. When the newspaper confronted him with the videotape, the entire house of cards collapsed. He confessed everything. For over 20 years, he had been faking his discoveries. He had planted artifacts at dozens of sites across the country. Almost the entire early Paleolithic history of Japan, a history he had personally authored, was a lie. His motivation was a strange and sad one. He said he was driven by a pressure to find older and older things, to keep the reputation he had built. He had become a prisoner of his own myth. The scandal was an earthquake in the Japanese academic world. It was a moment of profound national embarrassment. An entire field of study had to be re-examined, its foundations revealed to be nothing more than the secret work of one man with a trowel and a desperate need to be important. Fujimura's lie was a complex one, built over decades. But some lies are much simpler. Sometimes, all it takes is a little bit of glue, a couple of mismatched bones, and the breathless desire of a world-famous magazine to believe in monsters.
Story number 8. The missing link that wasn't. A lie buried by a man with God's hands took decades of meticulous deception to build. But sometimes, a world-shaking lie requires no grand conspiracy at all. Sometimes, all it takes is a poor farmer, a little bit of glue, and the overwhelming desire of the world's most prestigious science magazine to believe in a beautiful monster. Let's journey to the late 1990s. The world of paleontology is electric with the dino bird theory, the idea that modern birds are the direct descendants of dinosaurs. It's a powerful, elegant theory, but it's missing one crucial piece of evidence: the perfect missing link. A fossil that isn't quite a dinosaur and isn't quite a bird, but something magically in between. Scientists are hunting for it desperately, and in 1999, in the pages of National Geographic, they announced to the world that they have found it. They call it Archaeoraptor. The fossil, smuggled out of northeastern China, was a paleontological dream come true. It had the teeth and slashing claws of a small, vicious dinosaur, a dromaeosaur, like a tiny velociraptor. But it also possessed the advanced skeletal features of a bird, and most importantly, the clear, undeniable impressions of feathers. It was, quite simply, the most important fossil of its generation. The cover of the magazine showed a stunning artist's reconstruction, a feathered creature, part lizard, part bird, frozen in time. The missing link was no longer missing. The fossil was unveiled at a massive press conference. It was hailed as a triumph, a vindication of the dino bird theory. The world's most trusted source for science had put its seal of approval on it. This was real. But almost immediately, the whispers started. Quietly at first, then louder. Something wasn't right. A few sharp-eyed paleontologists noticed inconsistencies. The tail looked wrong. The connection between the top and bottom halves of the fossil seemed unnatural, forced. The man who had first acquired the fossil for the museum, Stephen Zirkis, started to have a sinking feeling. He commissioned a high-tech CT scan of the fossil slab. The results were a paleontologist's worst nightmare. The scan revealed the truth in stark, undeniable detail. Archaeoraptor was not a single miraculous creature. It was a chimera, a fraud, a fossil Frankenstein's monster. A poor Chinese farmer, in a brilliant piece of folk artifice, had found two completely separate fossils. One was the body of a primitive bird. The other was the tail of a small dinosaur. Knowing that a complete and spectacular fossil would fetch a much higher price, he had simply glued them together. The scam was so clever, the pieces fit so well, that it had fooled almost everyone. The National Geographic team had been so blinded by their desire to find the missing link that they had rushed past the warning signs. They had skipped the normal, rigorous peer review process in their haste to publish a world-beating scoop. The retraction, when it came, was a moment of profound humiliation for the magazine. They had to admit to the world that their groundbreaking discovery was nothing more than a clever forgery pieced together in a Chinese farmhouse. The scandal exposed a deep flaw in the way science is sometimes communicated, where the pressure for a spectacular headline can overwhelm the need for careful, methodical proof. Archaeoraptor was a lie born of a farmer's poverty and a scientist's ambition. It was a beautiful dream that turned out to be just that. But faking the bones of the past is one thing. What about faking your own footprints in the present? What about claiming to be the first human to stand at the very top of the world, a place of mythic, deadly cold? And what if you weren't the only one telling that lie? Story number 9. The race to the top of nobody's world. A glued-together fossil is a lie you can hold in your hands, a lie you can expose with a CT scanner. But what about a lie told in a place where there are no witnesses, a place of absolute desolation, of endless white, where the only records are the ones you write yourself? Let's talk about a lie told at the very top of the world. Welcome to the dawn of the 20th century, the age of heroic exploration. The continents have been mapped, the great rivers have been charted, but there remain a few mythic, unconquered prizes on the globe. The third pole, Mount Everest, is still decades away from being climbed. And then there are the two ends of the Earth itself, the South and North Poles. To be the first man to stand on either was to guarantee yourself a place in history forever. In this arena, two American explorers are locked in a bitter, all-consuming rivalry: Robert Peary and Frederick Cook. Peary was the establishment figure, a naval officer, grim, determined, backed by powerful societies and wealthy patrons. Cook was the underdog, a doctor, an ethnographer, a man who claimed a more sensitive, scientific approach to exploration. And they despised each other. In 1908, Frederick Cook returns from the Arctic and makes a stunning announcement that electrifies the world. He has done it. He, along with two Inuit companions, reached the North Pole on April 21, 1908. He is hailed as a hero. Parades are thrown in his honor. He is the man who has conquered the Arctic. His story is a gripping one, a tale of unimaginable hardship, of surviving on muskox and braving temperatures that could freeze a man solid in minutes. The world is captivated. For about a year. Then, in September of 1909, Robert Peary returns from his own expedition, and he sends a short, sharp telegram that lands like a cannonball. Stars and stripes nailed to the North Pole. He claims to have reached the pole on April 6, 1909, nearly a full year after Cook. But he doesn't stop there. He also declares that Cook is a fraud, that his claims are a lie, that he, Peary, is the one true conqueror of the pole. Suddenly, the world had a problem. Two men were claiming the same historic first. It became one of the most vicious and public scientific feuds in history. Newspapers took sides. Experts weighed in. It was the North Pole controversy. Cook's story began to unravel first. It turned out he had a bit of a history of exaggeration. His crucial navigational records were conveniently missing. The Inuit men who traveled with him gave conflicting and confusing accounts, saying they had traveled a long way over the ice, but had no idea if they had reached a specific pole. His claim was eventually discredited by most of the establishment. Peary, in contrast, was celebrated. Congress officially recognized his achievement. He was promoted to Rear Admiral. He got the glory. He won. But here's the cold, bitter truth that has emerged from a century of analyzing their records. It's almost certain that both of them were lying. Modern analysis of Peary's own expedition logs shows massive discrepancies. The speeds he claimed to have traveled during his final dash to the pole were almost superhuman, far faster than he had managed at any other point. His own navigator was sent back before the final push, meaning Peary was the only one in his party who could take the complex sightings needed to confirm their position. There were no independent witnesses. Most polar historians now believe Peary likely missed the pole by at least 30 and possibly as many as 100 miles. He either made a massive navigational error, or, more likely, he knew he was short and simply faked the final entries in his diary. So the Great Race to the North Pole, that epic tale of heroic endurance, likely ended with two men returning home to tell two different lies. Neither of them got there. But one of them told a more convincing lie than the other. Their lies were told on the shifting canvas of sea ice. But what about a lie carved in stone? A lie that doesn't just claim a place, but rewrites the entire history of a continent, placing Vikings in the heart of America centuries before Columbus. Story number 10. The Viking Stone That Spoke with a Swedish Accent. A lie told on the blank frozen canvas of the Arctic is a lie about personal achievement. It's a story about, I was there. But a lie carved into stone, pulled from the soil of a nation's heartland? That's a lie about, we were here. It's a story that tries to rewrite the very origins of a country. Let's go to the year 1898. The place is Kensington, a small rural township in Minnesota, populated largely by Scandinavian immigrants. A hard-working farmer named Olof Oman is out clearing his land, grubbing up trees to expand his fields. As he pulls a poplar tree from the earth, he finds something entangled in its roots, a large, flat slab of gray stone. And it's covered in strange carvings. The markings look like the runes of the ancient Norsemen. This was more than just a curiosity. For the Scandinavian communities of the Midwest, this was a revelation. The story carved into the stone, once translated, was the stuff of legend. It told of a group of 8 Goths, that is, Swedes, and 22 Norwegians, on an exploration journey from Vinland to the west. It described how 10 of their men were found, red with blood and dead, by the sea. And it ended with a plea to the Virgin Mary to save them from evil. The most crucial part? The stone was dated. The year was 1362. 1362. More than a century before Columbus sailed the ocean blue. The Kensington runestone, as it became known, was an artifact of earth-shattering importance. If it was real, it meant that Vikings hadn't just made fleeting landings on the coast of North America. It meant they had penetrated deep into the continent, all the way to the Great Plains of Minnesota. It was proof that the first European explorers of the American heartland were not Spanish or French, but hardy Norsemen. For the immigrant farmers of Minnesota, it was a profound validation of their own place in the American story. They hadn't just come to America, they were returning. The stone became an immediate sensation and a source of fierce debate. Academics and linguists descended, and almost right away, they found problems. A lot of them. The runes themselves were a strange jumble of different styles from different centuries. The grammar and vocabulary were odd. They seemed much closer to the Swedish spoken by 19th century immigrants than the Old Norse of the 14th century. There were words and grammatical forms that simply didn't exist back then. The experts declared it a fake, a modern forgery. They suggested it was a prank, or perhaps a hoax created by a local man with a passion for Norse history and a chisel. Olof Oman, the farmer, was under a cloud of suspicion for the rest of his life, though he always swore he had found it just as he said. But here is where the story gets interesting. The lie, if it was a lie, refused to die. Despite the overwhelming linguistic evidence against it, the Kensington runestone became an article of faith. The official verdict of hoax was seen by many locals not as a scientific conclusion, but as an act of condescension from East Coast elites who wanted to protect the Columbus narrative. A dedicated community of amateur historians and enthusiasts rose up to defend the stone's authenticity. They wrote books, they created museums, they offered alternative theories for the strange language, suggesting it was a unique dialect or the result of linguistic evolution. To this day, the debate rages. For mainstream historians and linguists, the case is closed. It's a 19th century forgery. But for a passionate and vocal group of believers, it remains a sacred relic, a testament to a secret history. The stone sits today in a museum in Alexandria, Minnesota, a tourist attraction that draws thousands of visitors. It's a perfect example of a lie that has become more powerful than the truth. The story it tells is just too good, too resonant to be dismissed by mere facts. Some lies, however, are not meant to be believed forever. Some are designed as pure mischief, a firework of fiction launched into the world just to see the explosion of wonder it creates. Story number 11, The Man Who Crossed the Ocean in a Balloon of Words. A lie carved in stone is meant to last, to insinuate itself into the very fabric of history. But some lies are not built for the ages, they are built for the moment. They are ephemeral, brilliant, and designed to ignite the public imagination like a flash of gunpowder, only to vanish into smoke. This is the story of a lie told by one of America's greatest masters of the macabre, not to deceive, but to delight. The year is 1844, the city is New York, and the primary source of news, entertainment, and wild speculation is the daily newspaper, sold for a penny on bustling street corners. In this world, a new paper, the New York Sun, is making a name for itself with sensational, eye-popping stories. And on April 13th, it published the scoop of the century. Under a breathless headline, the paper ran an extra edition detailing an astonishing feat of human ingenuity and courage. A European gentleman, a renowned aeronaut named Monk Mason, had successfully crossed the Atlantic Ocean. Not in a ship, but in a steerable hot air balloon named the Victoria. The article, written with an incredible, almost hallucinatory level of detail, described the entire journey. It spoke of the ingenious propeller mechanism, the powerful rudder, the comfortable wicker car. It quoted from the journal of the voyagers, describing their awe at seeing the ocean churning below, the passing ships looking like toys. The journey, according to the paper, had taken a mere 75 hours, 3 days, an absolute miracle of modern science. New York City went completely insane. The story was the only thing anyone was talking about. Crowds swarmed the newspaper's offices, desperate for more information, for a glimpse of these heroic balloonists who had conquered the sky and the sea. The idea itself was intoxicating. It was the dawn of a new age, a promise that technology was about to shrink the world in ways no one had ever imagined. For a few frantic hours, it was the most real, most exciting news on the planet. And it was, from beginning to end, a complete and total fabrication. The author of the article was none other than Edgar Allan Poe. At the time, he was a struggling writer, not yet the literary giant we know today. He concocted the entire story as a hoax, a piece of what we would now call fake news, to generate buzz and, frankly, to make a little money. He filled it with plausible-sounding scientific jargon, with precise measurements and convincing character details, all spun from the darkest and most inventive corners of his own mind. He had essentially written a science fiction story and passed it off as journalism. The lie didn't last long, of course. Within a day or two, when Monk Mason and his wondrous balloon failed to materialize in Charleston, South Carolina, as the article had promised, the truth came out. The Sun had to issue a retraction. But people weren't even angry. They were amused. They were impressed by the sheer audacity and creativity of the hoax. Poe's balloon hoax, as it became known, was a masterful demonstration of the power of narrative. It showed that if you tell a lie with enough confidence, with enough vivid detail, people won't just believe it,
They will want to believe it. It was a harmless, brilliant deception, a piece of public theater. But a century later, another great institution, this time in Britain, would take Poe's idea and elevate it to an art form, using the new medium of television to convince a nation of an agricultural absurdity so profound, it remains a classic to this day.
Story number 12. The Great Spaghetti Harvest of Switzerland. Edgar Allan Poe's balloon hoax was a flash of literary mischief, a one-day wonder. It was a lie told on the printed page. But what happens when the lie is broadcast into people's living rooms? What happens when it's delivered with the calm, unwavering authority of the world's most trusted news organization? Let us travel to Britain. The year is 1957. Television is still a relatively new magic. For most families, it is the window to the world. And the voice that comes through that window, the voice of the BBC, is the voice of truth. It is sober, it is reliable, it is unimpeachable. Especially its flagship news program, Panorama. On the evening of April 1st, Panorama aired a segment. It was a short 3-minute film narrated by the distinguished and universally respected broadcaster, Richard Dimbleby. The segment was about the annual spaghetti harvest in the Ticino region of southern Switzerland. The footage was remarkable. Against a backdrop of beautiful mountains, viewers saw Swiss peasant women in traditional dress carefully plucking long strands of spaghetti from the branches of lush green trees. They would lay the pasta in wicker baskets to dry in the warm alpine sun. Dimbleby's voice, calm and reassuring, explained the finer points of the harvest. He spoke of the virtual disappearance of the spaghetti weevil, the pest that had so troubled past seasons. He noted how the uniform length of the spaghetti strands was the result of many years of patient endeavor by the local growers. It was all delivered with the utmost seriousness. There was no wink to the camera, no hint of a joke. This was Panorama. This was the BBC. This was news. The reaction was immediate and utterly astonishing. The BBC switchboard lit up with calls. Hundreds and hundreds of people phoned in. But they weren't calling to complain about being fooled. They were calling, in all seriousness, to ask for advice. They wanted to know, how can I grow my own spaghetti tree? The staff at the BBC, with wonderfully British politeness, reportedly gave them a standard, straight-faced answer. Place a sprig of spaghetti in a tin of tomato sauce and hope for the best. The Swiss spaghetti harvest is now legendary. It is considered one of the greatest April Fool's Day hoaxes of all time. But it's more than just a good prank. It was a landmark moment that exposed the incredible, almost hypnotic power of the new medium of television. In 1844, Poe's balloon hoax required a detailed, wordy article to convince people. In 1957, all it took was a few minutes of plausible-looking footage and a trusted voice. Seeing, it turned out, really was believing. The hoax played on a gentle, charming ignorance. Most Britons at the time considered pasta a somewhat exotic foreign food, and many simply didn't know how it was made. The lie worked because it filled a gap in their knowledge with a beautiful, whimsical image. It was a good-natured deception that made everyone smile. But what about a deception designed not to charm, but to embarrass? A lie created as an intellectual weapon, a Trojan horse made of nonsense, sent into the heart of academia just to prove it was hollow? Story number 13. The Trojan horse made of nonsense. The spaghetti harvest was a gentle prank, a lie that played on public innocence and left everyone smiling. But this next story is about a very different kind of hoax. This was a weaponized lie. An intellectual sting operation designed not to create wonder, but to expose what its creator saw as a profound and dangerous absurdity at the heart of academic life. Let's go to the 1990s. The world of the humanities, especially literary theory and cultural studies, is dominated by a school of thought known as postmodernism. To its adherents, it is a sophisticated and necessary way of deconstructing language, power, and reality itself. To its detractors, it is a swamp of impenetrable jargon, intellectual posturing, and a dangerous rejection of the very idea of objective truth. In this world of dense, theoretical debate, we find Alan Sokal, a professor of physics at New York University. He is a man of science. He believes in evidence, in logic, in empirical proof. And as he reads the leading journals of postmodern cultural studies, he is both baffled and appalled. He sees scientific concepts, quantum gravity, chaos theory, topology, being used as loose, fashionable metaphors, seemingly without any understanding of what they actually mean. He begins to suspect that the entire field has become an echo chamber, that the editors of these prestigious journals are so enamored with a certain kind of opaque, left-leaning, jargon-filled prose that they will publish anything, as long as it feels right and flatters their ideological prejudices. And he decides to set a trap. He writes an academic paper. Its title alone is a masterpiece of gobbledygook, Transgressing the Boundaries Toward a Transformative Hermeneutics of Quantum Gravity. The article is, from beginning to end, complete and utter nonsense. It is a dense thicket of scientific terminology, historical references, and philosophical musings, all deliberately strung together to mean absolutely nothing. It argues, among other things, that physical reality is a social and linguistic construct. It is filled with paragraphs of pure gibberish, peppered with flattering quotes from the leading lights of postmodernism. It is a perfect imitation of the style he was critiquing. It was a parody so subtle that it was indistinguishable from the real thing. He submits this nonsensical article to a leading peer-reviewed journal of postmodern cultural studies called Social Text. He holds his breath, and they publish it. In the spring of 1996, the article appeared in a special Science Wars issue of the journal. It was presented as a serious contribution to the field by a credentialed scientist. Sokal had done it. His Trojan horse was inside the city walls. The day the journal was published, Sokal revealed the hoax in a separate magazine, Lingua Franca. He explained, in clear, simple terms, that his paper was a parody, a pastiche of left-wing cant, fawning references, grandiose quotations, and outright nonsense. He stated that he had been inspired by the feeling of being an unbeliever at a revival meeting. The explosion was immediate and spectacular. The Sokal affair, as it came to be known, created a firestorm in the academic world. On one side, Sokal was hailed as a hero, a whistleblower who had bravely exposed the intellectual bankruptcy and lack of rigor in a whole academic discipline. On the other, he was condemned as an unethical prankster, a scientist who had acted in bad faith and had unfairly maligned a complex field he didn't understand. But the damage was done. The affair raised deeply uncomfortable questions about academic peer review, the use and abuse of language, and whether certain corners of the humanities had become detached from reality. It was a lie designed to reveal a truth, a blast of nonsense aimed at what one man saw as a greater, more pervasive nonsense. Sokal's hoax was the work of a mature, calculating academic. But sometimes, the most astonishing literary deceptions come not from a place of intellectual cynicism, but from the desperate, brilliant mind of a child. Story number 14. The Boy Poet Who Wrote from the Grave. Alan Sokal's hoax was a calculated intellectual strike, the work of a mature professor with a point to prove. This, however, is a story about a very different kind of literary deception. A lie born not of cynicism, but of desperate, heartbreaking genius. A lie created by a boy who invented a ghost because the world refused to listen to his own voice. Let's travel back to the 1760s. The city is Bristol, England. It is a grimy, bustling port, but it is also a city with a deep, romantic sense of its own medieval past. And in this city lives a boy named Thomas Chatterton. He is different. He is obsessed with the past. He haunts old churches, pores over ancient manuscripts, and teaches himself the archaic, almost alien English of the Middle Ages. He is a prodigy, a poet of astonishing natural talent, but he is also poor, proud, and utterly alone. He writes poetry, brilliant, vivid poetry. But he is a child, an unknown from the provinces. Who would take him seriously? So, at the tender age of 12, he invents a better poet than himself, a ghost. He calls his creation Thomas Rowley, a fictional 15th century monk and poet from Bristol. And then Chatterton begins to discover Rowley's lost works. He produces scraps of parchment, aged with charcoal dust and stained with tea to look ancient. Upon these, he writes out epic poems, ballads, and historical descriptions of old Bristol, all in a painstakingly crafted pseudo-medieval script and language. It was a complete, immersive act of literary ventriloquism. He didn't just write the poems, he created an entire historical context for them, a whole lost world. And Bristol's literary society fell for it completely. The city's historians and antiquarians were enthralled. Here was a local boy who was unearthing a treasure trove of their city's lost history, written by a previously unknown master. Chatterton, the boy, was merely the humble discoverer. Rowley, the monk, was the genius. Chatterton fed them a steady stream of newly found manuscripts, and his reputation as a boy of remarkable fortune grew. But Chatterton craved more. He wanted literary fame on a national scale. He sent some of Rowley's manuscripts to Horace Walpole, a famous London intellectual and a leading figure of the Gothic revival. At first, Walpole was enchanted. But then, he and his more scholarly friends looked closer. The language, like the Kensington runestones, was just wrong. It was a brilliant pastiche, yes, but it was filled with anachronisms and poetic conventions that a real 15th century monk would never have used. Walpole gently but firmly dismissed the poems as forgeries and advised the young man to stick to his day job. For Chatterton, this rejection was a devastating blow. Feeling trapped and humiliated, he left Bristol for London at the age of 17, determined to make his name as a writer under his own name. But the city was a brutal, unforgiving place. He scrabbled for work, wrote feverishly, and lived on the brink of starvation, too proud to accept charity. His story ends in a lonely London garret, just a few months after his arrival. He was 17 years old. Unable to bear the poverty and the crushing disappointment, he took his own life. The tragedy is, the moment he died, the world recognized his genius. The Rowley poems were published, and even though they were known to be his own creations, the literary world was stunned by their power and originality. Thomas Chatterton, the boy who had to invent a ghost to be heard, became a martyr hero for the Romantic movement. He was the ultimate symbol of unrecognized genius, a brilliant talent crushed by an indifferent world. His was a lie born of a desperate need for a voice. But some lies are born of a much lighter spirit, a spirit of pure, collaborative fun, designed to create a paradise that existed only on the printed page. Story number 15, The Republic of Lost Punctuation. Thomas Chatterton's lie was a desperate cry for recognition, the tragic act of a lone genius. But sometimes, a lie isn't a weapon or a cry for help. Sometimes it's a party. A collaborative, joyful, and breathtakingly clever deception designed not to fool the world forever, but just for one glorious day. The date is April the 1st, 1977. The newspaper is The Guardian. Now, you have to understand, The Guardian wasn't some flimsy tabloid. It was, and is, a serious paper for serious people. The preferred read of teachers, academics, and intellectuals. It was a bastion of sober, left-leaning thought, the last place on earth you'd expect to find a prank. And on this particular morning, subscribers opened their paper to find something extraordinary. Tucked inside was a special 7-page travel supplement. A lush, detailed, and beautifully written guide to a little-known island nation celebrating 10 years of independence, the Republic of Sans Serif. The supplement was a masterpiece of world-building. It described a sun-drenched archipelago located in the Indian Ocean, with a map showing its two main islands, uppercase and lowercase. The shape of the nation was unusual. The islands were arranged, strangely but beautifully, in the shape of a semicolon. Readers learned about the charming capital city, Bodoni, and the nation's gruff but beloved leader, General Pika. They read about the island's culture, its economy, its unique flora and fauna. There were ads from companies offering package holidays,
It was all utterly, completely convincing. And the British public, bless them, took the bait. Hook, line, and sinker. The newspaper's phones began to ring off the hook all day. But the callers weren't angry readers who had spotted the joke. No, they were excited, prospective tourists.
They wanted to know which travel agencies had flights to this idyllic paradise. They had fallen in love with sans serif, and they wanted to book their summer holidays there. Of course, the entire thing was a meticulously crafted fiction, a massive April Fool's Day joke. And the genius of it was that all the clues were hiding in plain sight, in the language itself. The entire republic was a giant extended pun on the language of printing and typography. Sans serif? Sans serif, a type of font. The island's uppercase and lowercase? Uppercase and lowercase letters. The capital city, Bodoni, and the leader, General Pika? Both are terms from the world of typography. Every single name in the 7-page supplement was a pun that would be obvious to anyone in the printing trade, but would fly right over the head of the average reader. It was a perfect hoax, a victimless crime, a shared joke that left nothing but a fond memory and a testament to the power of creative deception. It didn't seek to defraud or defame. It sought only to create a moment of collective, delightful confusion. It was a lie that created a fantasy island. But some lies aren't jokes. They don't create a fantasy of place. They create a fantasy of wealth. A mirage of money so vast and so stable that it fools not just casual readers for a day, but the entire financial world for decades, before vanishing into thin air and taking everything with it. Story number 16, The Man Who Built a Skyscraper of Air. A fantasy island in a newspaper is a harmless delight. Its collapse causes no real pain. But what about a fantasy of wealth? A deception that isn't built on puns, but on the solemn promises of financial security. This is a story about a lie that wasn't a prank, but a predator. A lie that became the single largest and most devastating fraud in the history of the world. To understand this, you have to forget the image of the sleazy back-alley con artist. Think of the exact opposite. Think of a titan, a legend, Bernard Madoff. He wasn't some outsider, he was the system. He was a former chairman of the NASDAQ Stock Exchange. He was a respected investment advisor, a philanthropist, a pillar of the New York financial community. For decades, his name was synonymous with success, stability, and, most importantly, trust. His investment fund was the stuff of Wall Street legend. It delivered what seemed impossible: steady, consistent, and frankly, spectacular returns, year after year. Whether the market was booming or crashing, Madoff's clients got their check. He was a magician. In a world of volatility and risk, he offered a beautiful, soothing certainty. He didn't promise wild, unbelievable profits, just a solid, reliable 10 to 12% a year, every year. It was the perfect lure. Not too greedy, just perfect. His client list was a who's who of the global elite. Banks, hedge funds, charities, university endowments. Famous actors, legendary directors, the kind of wealthy, sophisticated people you would never think of as suckers. They handed him their money, their life savings, their foundations, their futures. Why wouldn't they? He was Bernie Madoff, the safest pair of hands in the business. And the business was a lie. All of it. There were no brilliant investments. There was no secret trading strategy. There was no magic. For more than 20 years, and possibly longer, Madoff's entire operation was a simple, classic Ponzi scheme, just scaled up to a monstrous, unbelievable size. The returns his old clients were getting? That was just the money his new clients were giving him. He was paying off investors with other investors' money. He never made a single trade. His legendary investment fund was a complete fiction. The monthly statements showing a portfolio of stocks and bonds were fabricated, printed in a secret back office. He had built a $65 billion empire on nothing but paper and trust. Think about the sheer nerve of that. Every day, for decades, he went to work and presided over a phantom fortune. He looked his friends in the eye, took their money, and fed it into the machine, knowing that the whole thing was a hollow shell that could implode at any moment. And in 2008, it did. The global financial crisis hit. The tide of new money coming in slowed to a trickle, and a wave of investors, spooked by the markets, asked for their money back. But there was no money. The magic skyscraper of air collapsed. In December of that year, Bernard Madoff confessed to his sons that his entire business, his entire life's work, was one big lie. The fallout was a human catastrophe. People who had thought they were multimillionaires were left with nothing. Decades of savings vanished overnight. Charities that did essential work had to close their doors. The fraud didn't just steal money, it stole futures. It stole the trust that underpins the entire financial system. Madoff's lie was so powerful because he wasn't just a man, he was an institution. He used his reputation as a shield. But what happens when the lie comes not from an old master of the universe, but from a young, charismatic visionary? A new kind of genius promising not just to make you rich, but to save your life with a single drop of blood.
Story number 17. The Empress with no clothes and a syringe. Bernie Madoff's lie was an old-world deception, a classic Ponzi scheme hidden behind a veneer of Wall Street respectability. It preyed on a desire for wealth. This next story is about a new world lie, a Silicon Valley deception wrapped in the language of revolutionary technology and messianic ambition. And it preyed on a much deeper desire, the hope for health. Welcome to the 2010s, the era of the tech visionary. We have learned to worship at the altar of the young, brilliant college dropout who sees the future and builds it in a garage. And no one fit that role more perfectly than Elizabeth Holmes. She was magnetic. She had a story that was pure Silicon Valley scripture. She had dropped out of Stanford's prestigious chemical engineering program with a revolutionary idea. She dressed in a uniform of black turtlenecks, deliberately evoking Steve Jobs. She spoke in a deep, hypnotic baritone about her mission: to democratize healthcare. She was hailed as the next Steve Jobs, the youngest self-made female billionaire in the world. And at the heart of her empire was a miracle machine, a small, sleek box called the Edison. Her company, Theranos, promised that this machine could run hundreds of complex blood tests, from cholesterol checks to cancer screenings, all from a single, painless pinprick of blood taken from a fingertip. Think about what that promised. No more big, scary needles in the arm. No more vials and vials of blood. Instant results available to everyone, everywhere, from a device in your local pharmacy. It wasn't just an invention. It was a revolution that would save millions of lives. The world was captivated. The story was irresistible. And the money poured in. Theranos was valued at over $9 billion. Its board of directors was a breathtaking collection of the most powerful men in America. Former secretaries of state, senators, generals. They weren't just investors, they were apostles. They believed in Elizabeth Holmes and her world-changing vision. Major pharmacy chains signed massive deals to put Theranos' miracle machines in their stores. There was just one tiny, insignificant problem. The machine didn't work. It never had. The revolutionary technology that Holmes described in her hypnotic talks was a complete fiction. The Edison machine was a malfunctioning, unreliable black box that could barely perform a handful of the tests it promised. And even those were often wildly inaccurate. So how did Theranos produce results? How did they run their business? They cheated. While showing the world the shiny, futuristic Edison box, they were secretly running the blood samples they received on standard, commercially available machines made by their competitors. They were operating a traditional blood testing lab, and a very poorly run one at that, while pretending to be a revolutionary tech company. They were faking the demonstrations for investors. They were lying about their capabilities. And, most chillingly, they were sending out flawed, inaccurate test results to real patients, putting actual human lives at risk. The lie was a masterpiece of modern marketing and myth-making. Holmes didn't sell a product, she sold a story. A story about a better world, with herself as the heroic protagonist. People were so desperate to believe in the story that they never bothered to ask the hard questions. They never demanded to see the audited data. They just believed. The deception was finally and bravely exposed by a series of articles in the Wall Street Journal. A journalist named John Carreyrou, acting on a tip from a skeptical employee, refused to be intimidated by the army of high-powered lawyers Theranos threw at him. He painstakingly unraveled the entire web of lies. The collapse was as spectacular as the rise. Theranos, once the brightest star in Silicon Valley, was exposed as a hollow shell. The Empress had no clothes. It was a brutal lesson that a great story, even one told with messianic zeal, is no substitute for the truth, especially when people's lives are on the line. The Theranos lie was about a technology that didn't exist. But what happens when the lie is about something that does exist? Something primal and universally desired. Something you can find in the ground. Something that glitters. Like gold. Story number 18. The gold mine that was a wedding ring. The lie of Theranos was a lie about the future. It was a promise of a technology that was just around the corner. This next story is about a much older, more elemental lie. A lie about the past, about what is already hidden in the ground waiting to be found. A lie about gold. Let's go to the mid-1990s, the jungles of Borneo, Indonesia, one of the most remote, inhospitable places on the planet. And in the heart of this jungle, a small, little-known Canadian mining company called breathtaking Minerals claims it has found something big. At first, the reports are just trickles of good news, encouraging drill samples. Then the trickles become a flood. The company's chief geologist, a man named Michael de Guzman, is reporting astonishing finds. The numbers are getting bigger and bigger. The company announces an estimated find of 2 million ounces of gold, a huge discovery. Their stock price, which had been trading for pennies, starts to climb. Then the numbers get insane. 30 million ounces. 70 million ounces. The estimates keep growing. breathtaking announces that their site in Busang, Indonesia, is not just a gold mine. It is the single richest gold deposit ever discovered in the history of the world. 200 million ounces. A river of gold running through the jungle. Wall Street went into a frenzy. This was the find of the century. The stock price for breathtaking exploded, soaring from pennies to over $200 a share. Small-time investors, teachers, plumbers, retirees poured their life savings into the company. It was a sure thing. Major mining conglomerates, the giants of the industry, entered a frantic bidding war, trying to partner with this tiny Canadian company that had hit the geological jackpot. The government of Indonesia got involved. It was an international sensation. The total value of the company skyrocketed to more than $6 billion. It was a beautiful, glittering story, a classic tale of the little guy striking it rich in a faraway land. And in the middle of this global gold rush, in March of 1997, the geologist Michael de Guzman, the man whose drill samples were the foundation of this entire empire, boards a helicopter to fly out to the Busang site. He never arrives. He reportedly fell from the helicopter mid-flight into the dense jungle thousands of feet below. His death was initially ruled a suicide, and it was the first terrifying crack in the golden facade. The Indonesian government ordered due diligence. A major American mining firm was brought in to conduct its own tests to verify the breathtaking results. Their geologists went to Busang. They drilled new cores right next to the original breathtaking sites. They took the samples, they analyzed them, and they found nothing. Not a little bit of gold. Not a disappointing amount of gold. They found, in scientific terms, jack shit. Trace amounts. The kind of gold dust you would find in almost any random patch of dirt. The richest gold mine in the world was completely barren. The truth, when it was pieced together, was both ingenious and pathetic. De Guzman hadn't been finding gold. He had been faking it. He had been salting the samples.
He would take the crushed rock core from the drill site and mix in tiny amounts of gold dust that he had purchased from local panners. He was adding the gold himself. And where did that gold come from? Later analysis showed that some of it wasn't the sharp-edged alluvial gold found in rivers. It had rounded edges. It was shavings. Forensic analysis proved that he had, among other things, been filing down his own gold wedding ring into the sample bags. The entire $6 billion Bre-X empire was built on a lie and a handful of gold dust, some of it from the ring that symbolized his own sacred vows. When the news broke, the Bre-X stock collapsed to zero in a matter of days. Billions of dollars of investors' money vanished into thin air. It was a fraud of almost unimaginable audacity, a lie that fed a global fever dream until it all evaporated in the tropical heat. This was a lie told by a few individuals to the whole world. But what about a lie told by an entire industry to itself? A secret, gentleman's agreement, not to create a fake treasure, but to deliberately sabotage a real one. Story number 19, the conspiracy that kept the world in the dark. The Bre-X scam was a chaotic lie, a fraud that exploded and vanished. This next story is about a very different kind of deception. A quiet, patient, and chillingly effective lie. A lie told not to create a sudden boom, but to engineer a slow, steady, and profitable decay. This isn't a story about a conspiracy theory. This is the story of a conspiracy that was a proven fact. Let's go back to Geneva. The year is 1924. The world is glowing. The electric light bulb is no longer a novelty. It is the symbol of modern life itself. And in a quiet, wood-paneled room, the most powerful men in that glowing world are meeting in secret. They represent the biggest light bulb manufacturers on the planet. Osram from Germany, Philips from the Netherlands, General Electric from America. All the major players. They are there to form a cartel, a secret trust. They give it a code name that sounds solid and respectable. The Phoebus Cartel. And their stated goal is simple: to control the global market for light bulbs. They will set prices. They will divide up the territories. Standard, if unethical, corporate collusion. But they had a much more radical, much more insidious idea at the heart of their plan. They weren't just going to control how many bulbs were sold and for how much. They were going to control how long the bulbs lasted. You see, they had a problem. The technology for making light bulbs was getting too good. In the early days, bulbs were fragile things that burned out quickly. But by the 1920s, engineers had created marvels. There were bulbs that could reliably burn for 2,000, even 2,500 hours. There's a famous bulb in a fire station in Livermore, California, that has been burning for over 100 years. The point is, durable, long-lasting light bulbs were a reality. And for the men of the Phoebus Cartel, this was a disaster. A bulb that never burns out is a bulb that you only sell once. It's terrible for business. So in that room in Geneva, they made a secret pact. They formed a committee, the 1,000 Hours Life Committee. And its purpose was to systematically, deliberately, and secretly re-engineer the light bulb to make it worse. They agreed to limit the lifespan of a standard household bulb to a maximum of 1,000 hours. This wasn't just a suggestion, it was an ironclad rule. The cartel had a meticulous enforcement mechanism. Companies had to regularly send samples of their bulbs to a central testing laboratory in Switzerland. If their bulbs were found to last, on average, longer than 1,000 hours, the company was fined. The longer the bulbs lasted, the heavier the fine. Think about the sheer, perverse brilliance of it. They were punishing their own engineers for making a good product. They were investing in research and development, not to improve their technology, but to actively sabotage it. To find the sweet spot where a bulb was good enough to work, but fragile enough to fail, ensuring a steady stream of repeat customers. And it worked. For decades. The 1,000-hour bulb became the global standard. People just accepted it as a fact of life. Oh, the bulb burned out. Time to buy a new one.
No one knew that this recurring, annoying, and expensive feature of modern life wasn't a limitation of the technology. It was a deliberate design choice, a secret agreement made in a Swiss boardroom. The cartel itself eventually fell apart due to the chaos of the Second World War, but its legacy lived on. The principle it established, the idea of planned obsolescence, of designing products to fail, became a cornerstone of 20th century manufacturing. It was a lie baked into the very filament of an object we all used every day. A quiet deception that cost the world billions and shaped our entire consumer culture. Most cons are about taking something that doesn't belong to you. But what about a con where you sell something that doesn't belong to you? Something very, very large. Something, for instance, like the Brooklyn Bridge. Story number 20. The man who sold the eighth wonder of the world. The Phoebus cartel was a sophisticated corporate deception, a lie hidden in spreadsheets and engineering specifications. This next story is about a lie of a completely different sort, a lie that was pure, unadulterated, face-to-face audacity. A lie that was a piece of street theater starring one of the most charming and brazen con artists who ever lived. Let's go to New York City in the late 1880s. The city is a marvel of the new industrial age, and its crown jewel, its undisputed symbol of power and progress, is the brand new Brooklyn Bridge. When it opened in 1883, it was the longest suspension bridge in the world, a breathtaking cathedral of steel cables and granite towers. It was the eighth wonder of the world, and to the newly arrived immigrants and wide-eyed tourists who flooded the city, it was a symbol of America itself. Big, bold, and magnificent. And to a man named George C. Parker, it was a business opportunity. Parker was not an engineer or a financier. He was a confidence man. But he was an artist of the craft. He was blessed with an honest face, a sincere and persuasive manner, and a deep understanding of human psychology. He understood that people, especially people who are a little overwhelmed and out of their element, are secretly hoping for a miracle. They want to believe that a golden opportunity is waiting just for them. And Parker's golden opportunity was the Brooklyn Bridge. His method was beautifully simple. He would hang around the bridge, often near the for sale signs that were posted on actual properties in the area. He would look for a likely mark, someone who looked a bit lost, a bit green, a tourist gazing up at the magnificent structure in awe. He would strike up a conversation. He would present himself, with quiet, dignified authority, as the owner of the bridge, or perhaps the head engineer or the lead contractor. He would explain that the city was looking for a private entrepreneur to take over the bridge's operation. He would talk about the incredible profits to be made from the tolls. He had a great eye for storytelling. He'd lament the headaches of ownership, the stress of managing such a massive enterprise, and hint that he was looking for the right person to take it off his hands, someone with vision and ambition. And then, he would offer to sell it to them. It sounds insane, doesn't it? Who would believe that a single man could own and sell the Brooklyn Bridge? But Parker was a master salesman. He had forged, official-looking documents. He had a compelling story. And he was selling not just a bridge, but a dream. The dream of making it big in America with one bold stroke. He sold it for as little as $50, and reportedly for as much as $50,000, depending on how wealthy his victim appeared to be. He would take their down payment in cash, hand them the impressive-looking deed, and then hurry away before they could have second thoughts. The punchline to the story usually came a few hours later. The proud new owners of the Brooklyn Bridge would often go down to their magnificent new property and begin to make plans. And that's when the police would be called. The officers of the NYPD became quite accustomed to having to gently, and sometimes not so gently, remove irate and heartbroken individuals who were trying to erect their own private toll booths across the bridge's roadway. Parker sold the Brooklyn Bridge not just once, but over and over again. By his own estimation, he sold it an average of twice a week for years. He also sold Madison Square Garden, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and Grant's Tomb, leasing it out with a handsome profit to the general's own descendants. George C. Parker was a fraud, but he was a legend.
His story gave us the classic American punchline. And if you believe that, I've got a bridge to sell you. He was a con man who turned a public landmark into his own personal, recurring, and very profitable fiction. Story number 21. The Man Who Stole a Husband's Face. George Parker's lie was a public performance, a grand deception played out on a city's biggest stage. But some lies are not meant for the crowd. They are quiet, intimate, and infinitely more terrifying. This is a story about a lie that didn't just sell a landmark, it stole a life, invading the most sacred space there is: a marriage, a family, a home. Imagine a world without photographs, without fingerprints or dental records, a world where identity is not a thing you can prove with a piece of paper, but a story held in the collective memory of a village. This is 16th century France. The village is Artegat, and here, a man's face is his only passport. Our story begins with a man named Martin Guerre. He is a young peasant married to a woman named Bertrand de Rolls. They have a child, they have a life. And then, one day, after a dispute with his father over stealing some grain, Martin Guerre simply disappears. He walks away from his farm, his wife, his son, and vanishes into the wider world. Years pass. 8 long years. The seasons turn, the boy grows. Bertrand lives in a state of limbo, a wife without a husband. Hope fades. And then, a man walks into a nearby town. He looks like Martin Guerre. He speaks like Martin Guerre. He claims to be Martin Guerre, returned at last from the wars. He is brought back to Artegat. The villagers gather. His own sisters look at him, and they see their long-lost brother. They embrace him. But the final test, the only one that truly matters, is Bertrand. She is brought before this stranger. She hesitates. She looks at him. He is heavier than she remembers, his features coarsened by time. But then he begins to speak. He speaks of their life together. He knows the intimate details, the shared secrets that only the two of them could possibly know. He knows the stories of their wedding night, the arguments they had, the private jokes. And Bertrand accepts him. He is her husband. For 3 years, this new Martin Guerre lives with her. They are, by all accounts, happy. They have 2 more children together. He manages the family farm with skill. The past is healed. The family is whole again. But a few whispers of doubt remain, mostly from a suspicious uncle. The whispers grow into accusations. This man is an impostor. The case goes to trial. And here's where the story gets truly strange. The man from the past is brilliant. He defends himself with astonishing confidence. He knows every detail of Martin Guerre's life so perfectly that he makes his accusers look like fools. He chastises Bertrand on the stand for ever having doubted him, and she publicly weeps and begs his forgiveness. The court is on the verge of acquitting him. He has almost won. And then, on the final day of the trial, a figure appears at the back of the courtroom. A man, hardened by years of war, with a grim face and a wooden leg. He is silent. He just stands there. The judges ask him who he is, and in a voice the whole village recognizes, he says his name. Martin Guerre. The lie collapses in an instant. The impostor, a clever drifter and soldier named Arnaud Dutil, had met the real Martin Guerre in the army, and Martin had shared his life story with him. Arnaud had memorized every detail, gambling that he could literally step into another man's shoes. In the face of the real thing, his performance was revealed as just that. But the chilling question remains. What about Bertrand? Was she a gullible victim, fooled by a master manipulator? Or was she a lonely woman who, faced with a kinder, more loving version of the husband who had abandoned her, decided to become a willing partner in the deception? We will never know. This was a lie that stole a life that already existed. But what about a lie that invents a life from whole cloth? A life so exotic, so fantastical, that the world can't help but be enchanted. Even if it's all just a story, made up by a cobbler's daughter, out of sheer, brilliant boredom. Story number 22, The Princess from the Island of Nowhere. Arnaud Dutil's deception was an audacious theft of a single, real identity. It was a lie designed to fill a space that a man had left empty. This next story, however, is about a lie of pure, joyful creation. A lie that didn't steal an identity, but invented one from scratch. A persona so exotic, so enchanting, that the high society of an entire region fell completely under its spell. The year is 1817. The place is a small village in Gloucestershire, England. One evening, a mysterious young woman appears seemingly out of nowhere. She is dressed in strange, foreign-looking clothes, a turban wrapped around her head, and she is speaking a language that no one can understand. It is a torrent of clicks, whirs, and beautiful melodic sounds that sound like nothing on earth. The local gentry are baffled and utterly fascinated. Who is this creature? Where did she come from? She is taken in by the local magistrate, whose wife tries to communicate with her through gestures. The woman is beautiful, with an aristocratic bearing. Using signs, she indicates that she was captured by pirates and had managed to escape, eventually finding her way to this small English village. Word spreads. Scholars and linguists are brought in to try and decipher her strange tongue. They are stumped. One man, a self-proclaimed expert, declares that he recognizes the language and identifies her as a princess from a remote island in the Indian Ocean called Javasu. He translates her story of royal lineage and perilous adventure. And so, she is christened Princess Caribou from Javasu. For the next 10 weeks, she becomes the absolute darling of high society. She is exotic, she is beautiful, she is a royal princess. People are charmed by her strange habits. She insists on swimming naked in the local lake. She prays to a god she calls Allah Ta'ala. She is an expert with a bow and arrow. She is a walking, talking fantasy, a living embodiment of the Romantic era's obsession with the faraway and the mysterious. Newspapers write breathless articles about her. Her portrait is painted. She is a sensation. She plays the part to perfection. She never breaks character. She continues to speak only in her strange musical language, communicating through the expert who first identified her. And then, one day, a woman who runs a boarding house sees a picture of the famous princess in a local paper. And she recognizes her, not as a princess, but as a girl named Mary Baker, the daughter of a village cobbler, a girl who had been a servant in her house just a few months before. The entire beautiful fantasy collapses. It turned out that Mary Baker was not a princess. She was just a clever, imaginative, and probably very bored young woman from Devon. There was no island of Javasu. The language she spoke was a complete invention, a mishmash of words she had made up, mixed with a bit of gypsy patois she had learned. The entire exotic persona, the prayers, the swimming, the archery, was a performance she had created out of whole cloth. When she was confronted, she confessed everything with a smile. The public, surprisingly, wasn't even angry. They were charmed by her cleverness and audacity. In a world of rigid social structures, a poor cobbler's daughter had, for a brief, shining moment, made herself a princess and turned the stuffy aristocracy into her adoring audience. Princess Caribou was a lie of pure imagination. But sometimes, a lie is not about creating a new persona. It's about resurrecting an old one. A lie so audacious, it challenges the very idea of family, identity, and truth, even when the evidence against it is literally staring you in the face. Story number 23, The Butcher Who Weighed More Than a Ghost. A lie like Princess Caribou's is a fantasy, a piece of performance art. It collapses under the first touch of reality, leaving behind little more than an amusing story. But what happens when a lie is so colossal, so contrary to all known facts that it shouldn't survive for a single minute, and yet it does? This is a story about a deception that defied logic, defied sight, and was kept alive by one of the most powerful forces on Earth, a mother's refusal to let go. The story begins with a genuine tragedy. The Tichborne family were wealthy, Catholic, English aristocrats. Their heir, a young man named Roger Tichborne, was lost at sea in 1854, his ship vanishing off the coast of South America. He was presumed dead. The family mourned. The estate passed to a younger brother, but Roger's mother, Lady Tichborne, refused to accept it. Consumed by grief, she clung to a desperate, irrational hope that her son had survived. For more than 10 years, she placed advertisements in newspapers around the world, seeking information about the lost Sir Roger. She was a mother searching for a ghost. And one day, a ghost answered. Word came from Wagga Wagga, Australia. A butcher, a heavy, uneducated man going by the name of Thomas Castro, claimed to be her son. He had a vague story of being rescued at sea and making a new life for himself in the outback. And so, this man was summoned back to England to claim his title and his fortune. And here is where the story pivots from a personal tragedy into a national madness. Because the man who arrived was not just a little different from the Roger Tichborne who had disappeared. He was a walking, talking contradiction. The real Roger had been a slender, almost delicate young man, educated in France, fluent in French. This claimant was enormous. He weighed well over 300 pounds, nearly twice what Roger had weighed. He was coarse, spoke with a thick working-class accent, and knew not a single word of French. He didn't recognize family members. He couldn't remember basic details of his own supposed childhood. And yet, he had somehow learned a few obscure facts about the Tichborne family that gave his story a thin veneer of credibility. The rest of the family took one look at him and dismissed him as a fraud, an absurd, laughable impostor. The case seemed open and shut. All that was needed was for Lady Tichborne to see him and confirm the obvious. She arranged to meet him in a dimly lit hotel room in Paris. The moment of truth. She entered the room. She looked at this immense, unfamiliar man who bore absolutely no resemblance to the son she had lost. And she did the one thing no one on earth expected. She embraced him. She declared, without a shadow of a doubt, that he was her long-lost son, Roger. Think about that. A mother's grief was so powerful that it literally overwrote the evidence of her own eyes. Her public acceptance was all the claimant needed. Suddenly, he wasn't just a butcher from Australia. He was the Tichborne heir, backed by the one person whose word should have mattered most. The affair exploded into the biggest legal battle and public spectacle of the Victorian era. The Tichborne claimant became a national sensation. It was more than a trial, it was a class war. The working classes championed the claimant, seeing him as one of their own, a simple man being cheated out of his rights by a conspiracy of stuffy aristocrats. The family, meanwhile, spent a fortune trying to prove he was who they suspected he was, Arthur Orton, a butcher's son from London who had fled to Australia. The trial was one of the longest in English history. In the end, the sheer weight of evidence against him was too much. He was exposed as Arthur Orton, convicted of perjury, and sent to prison. But for years, a lie that should have been laughable, a lie that was physically, demonstrably false, held a nation captive. It showed that if you can capture one person's heart with a lie, you can use their belief as a shield to wage war on reality itself. This was a deception that played out in courtrooms and newspapers, a spectacle of the industrial age. But a new age was coming, an age where a lie didn't need a courtroom to be heard. It just needed a webcam, a bedroom, and a girl with a secret. Story number 24, The Girl in the Bedroom Who Wasn't There. The Tichborne claimant was a lie of the old world, a grand theatrical deception that played out in newspapers and courtrooms over years. This is a story about a lie of the new world, a deception that was intimate, immediate, and unfolded not in public squares, but in the private glow of a million computer screens. A lie that marked the moment we all lost our innocence online. Let's go to the year 2006. YouTube is still a toddler, a chaotic, exciting new platform where anything seems possible. There are no influencers yet, no creators in the corporate sense. It's just a raw, unfiltered stream of home videos. And into this new digital wilderness, a channel appears. It's called Lonely Girl 15. The channel features a girl named Bree,
She is 16 years old, and she is, in a word, captivating. From her brightly colored bedroom filled with posters and stuffed animals, she talks to her webcam.
She is funny, she is awkward, she is intelligent, and she is incredibly relatable. She talks about the things all teenagers talk about: her dorky best friend Daniel, her struggles with her parents, the minor dramas of daily life. She is, for hundreds of thousands of viewers, a real person, a friend. But there was a darker, more intriguing thread woven into her seemingly ordinary video diaries. Bree was being homeschooled by her parents, who were part of a strict and mysterious religion. There were strange rules, whispers of an upcoming ceremony that she seemed to dread. The mundane teenage angst was slowly, masterfully, being blended with a creeping sense of occult dread. What was this religion? What was this ceremony? The world was hooked. A massive online community sprang up, dedicated to dissecting every second of Bree's videos. They were a new kind of audience, an interactive detective agency. They worried about her. They offered her advice. They tried to piece together the clues about the mysterious cult that seemed to be closing in on her. She wasn't just a vlogger. She was a mystery to be solved, a friend to be saved. The line between viewer and participant had blurred completely. And these internet sleuths, in their frantic desire to help Bree, started digging. They analyzed the background of her videos. They traced IP addresses. They looked for the real-world truth behind the online story. And they found it. It turned out there was no Bree. The 16-year-old girl in the bedroom was a 19-year-old actress from New Zealand named Jessica Lee Rose. Her best friend Daniel was a young actor. The entire Lonely Girl 15 saga, the bedroom, the parents, the cult, the friendship, was not a real-life video blog. It was a professionally written, produced, and acted web series created by 3 aspiring filmmakers from California. They had deliberately designed it to look and feel like a real YouTube channel, to tell a new kind of story. The revelation was a watershed moment for the internet. For many, it felt like a profound betrayal. The friend they had worried about, the girl they had tried to help, was a fiction. But for others, it was a moment of awe. The creators of Lonely Girl 15 hadn't just made a show, they had pioneered a new form of interactive narrative. They had used the language of online authenticity to create a fictional world that felt more real than reality. Lonely Girl 15 was the first great hoax of the YouTube era. It was a wake-up call that showed how easily a well-crafted fiction could masquerade as truth in the new digital world. It was a lie that entertained millions. But what about a lie that is purely for personal gain? A lie that isn't about telling a story, but about getting a free meal, a free visa, and even a crown to a kingdom that doesn't exist. Story number 25. The King of a Country Called Lunch. The Lonely Girl 15 hoax was a sophisticated media experiment, a lie that blurred the lines between fiction and reality for a global audience. This next story is about a much more old-fashioned, much more personal kind of lie. A lie told not for art or for an audience, but for the simple, timeless, and deeply human desire to get a free lunch and maybe, just maybe, a crown. Let's go to the 1920s, to the chaotic post-war world of Weimar Germany. It's a time of economic collapse, political instability, and social upheaval. A time when old identities are crumbling and new ones can be invented on the fly. And in this world, we find a man named Bruno Loader. He is a journalist, a bon vivant, and a man with a profound allergy to paying for his own meals. Loader possessed a simple but profound insight. In a world of rigid bureaucracy, people are so focused on the official stamp, the proper letterhead, and the confident tone of voice that they rarely question the reality behind them. And so, he embarked on a career of breathtakingly audacious, yet utterly harmless deception. His first great invention was a phantom country. He began presenting himself to hotels, restaurants, and government offices as the official representative of a newly formed state. He had different names for it at different times, but his favorite was Agafia. He had official-looking letterhead printed up. He carried a briefcase full of impressive but meaningless documents. And as a diplomat from this non-existent nation, he found that all sorts of doors suddenly open. He would arrive at a fine restaurant and declare that he was on an official mission for the government of Agafia, and that the bill, of course, should be sent to his nation's consulate, an address that was, naturally, a fiction. He secured visas to travel across Europe, not as a humble German journalist, but as a respected Agafian diplomat. He was playing a game with the very machinery of the state, and he was winning. But this was only his warm-up act. His masterpiece was yet to come. Loder eventually grew tired of merely representing a country. He decided to rule one. He announced the formation of a new sovereign state, the Kingdom of the Barracudas. He declared that it was a small, idyllic island in the South Pacific, and he, of course, was its king, Bruno I. This wasn't just a joke, he told his friends. This was a full-fledged diplomatic performance. As the King of the Barracudas, he entered into formal, written correspondence with the League of Nations in Geneva, the precursor to the United Nations. He would write to them on his royal letterhead, discussing matters of state, international trade, and the rights of his Barracudan subjects. The bureaucrats at the League, likely baffled but duty-bound to respond to what appeared to be official diplomatic correspondence from a member state they had simply never heard of, would write back. Think of the sheer, joyful absurdity of it. A German journalist, likely sitting in a smoky Berlin cafe, was engaged in a serious diplomatic dialogue with the world's highest international body, all in the name of a kingdom he had invented purely for his own amusement. Bruno Loder's deceptions were not malicious. He didn't ruin lives or steal fortunes. His was a lie as a form of art, a way of turning the dull, gray world of bureaucracy into his own personal playground. He saw that the world ran on a set of assumed truths and accepted fictions, and he simply decided to invent his own. His lies created a phantom kingdom. But what happens when the lie is not about a place on Earth, but a place far beyond it? What happens when a lie brings us a visitor from the stars, and its body ends up on a surgeon's table? Story number 26. The alien in the autopsy room who was full of chicken. The lies of a man like Bruno Loder are a game, a charming dance with reality. But this next story is about a lie that tapped into something much deeper, a modern myth, a story of cosmic visitors and government cover-ups that has haunted our collective imagination for decades. This is the story of the lie that finally gave the world what it had been waiting for, a body. Let's go to 1995. The world is in the grip of a pop culture phenomenon, the X-Files. The belief in UFOs and alien life is at an all-time high, and at the heart of this modern mythology is one single, resonant word: Roswell. The supposed crash of a flying saucer in the New Mexico desert in 1947. For believers, Roswell was the Genesis story, the moment the government found proof of alien life and locked it away in the dark. The one thing the story was always missing? The proof. And then, a British music and video producer named Ray Santilli announced he had it. Santilli claimed that he had been given a piece of footage by a retired elderly military cameraman who had been there, who had filmed the aftermath of the Roswell crash. It was, he said, top-secret film, hidden away for almost 50 years. And it showed the one thing the world was dying to see: the autopsy of one of the dead aliens recovered from the wreckage. The world held its breath. The footage was released at a massive press event at the Museum of London, and then broadcast on television networks in over 30 countries. It was a global event. The film itself was grainy, black and white, and deeply unsettling. On a surgical table, under the harsh glare of operating lights, lay a small humanoid figure. It had a large, bald head, huge, dark, almond-shaped eyes, a spindly frame, and 6 fingers on its hands. Men in white, full-body contamination suits, their faces obscured, methodically cut the creature open. They removed strange, unidentifiable organs. They sawed open its skull to reveal a large, dark brain. It was shocking. It was graphic. And for millions of people, it was real. The alien autopsy film became an absolute sensation. It was debated endlessly. UFO believers hailed it as the final, undeniable proof, the smoking gun they had been waiting for. Skeptics pointed out inconsistencies. Special effects experts argued about the techniques used. But Santilli stuck to his story. This was real. This was the footage. The lie held for over a decade. It became a cornerstone of UFO lore, a piece of evidence that for many elevated the Roswell story from a myth to a historical event. And then, in 2006, Santilli finally admitted the truth. Well, most of it. He confessed that the film was not, in fact, original 1947 footage. It was a reconstruction, a staging. He claimed the original film he had received had been too badly degraded to show, so he had painstakingly recreated what he had seen. But even that was a lie. The final, complete truth was that there was no original film. There was no military cameraman. The entire thing was a complete and utter fabrication from beginning to end. Santilli had hired a sculptor to create the alien body out of latex, rubber, and foam. The alien organs that the surgeons were pulling out with such grim seriousness? They were a gruesome cocktail of chicken entrails, sheep brains, and raspberry jam, bought from the local butcher shop and supermarket. The men in the hazmat suits were his friends. The whole thing had been shot in his friend's apartment in London. It was a brilliantly executed hoax. A lie that was so powerful because it gave people a picture of something they already desperately wanted to believe in. It wasn't just a film. It was a confirmation of a modern faith. A faith that, it turns out, can be built on a foundation of latex and chicken guts. This lie created a fake alien. But what about a lie that creates a fake ghost? A deception that doesn't come from outer space, but from the other side. Right here in our own world. With a little help from a girl with a piece of wood. Story number 27, The Ghost Who Lived Under the Bed. The alien autopsy film was a modern lie, a deception crafted for the television age. But our fascination with visitors from other worlds is not new. Before we look to the stars for aliens, we look to the shadows for ghosts. This is a story about a lie that conjured a spirit, not in a spaceship, but in a cramped London bedroom, creating a sensation that captivated a city and drew in some of the greatest minds of the age. The year is 1762. The place is London, a city of enlightenment and superstition, where science and spiritualism are locked in a tense, uneasy dance. The story begins in a humble apartment on a street called Cock Lane. A man named William Parsons, the landlord, begins to hear strange noises coming from the bedroom where his 11-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, sleeps. They are not the usual creaks and groans of an old building. They are scratches, knocks, a strange, ghostly communication. The sounds seem to center around the girl. Soon, a narrative emerges. The ghost, communicating through a series of knocks, one for yes, two for no, identifies herself. She is Fanny, the spirit of a woman who had recently died in that very apartment. But she hadn't died of smallpox, as everyone believed. She had been poisoned, murdered, by her own husband, a man named William Kent. The story is a bombshell, a ghost speaking from beyond the grave, accusing a man of murder. The Cock Lane ghost, as it becomes known, is an overnight sensation. Crowds flock to the house, hoping to witness the supernatural phenomena. The story is printed in all the papers. It is the talk of the town. People hold seances in the little girl's bedroom, asking the spirit questions and listening, rapt, as the mysterious knocks and scratches provide the answers. The ghost's accusation is very specific, and it conveniently benefits the landlord, William Parsons, who just so happens to be in a bitter financial dispute with the accused murderer, William Kent. Kent, his reputation and life on the line, furiously denies the charges and demands a proper investigation. The affair becomes so huge that a committee of distinguished gentlemen is assembled to get to the bottom of it. And this isn't just a group of local busybodies. The committee includes one of the most famous and respected men in all of England, Dr. Samuel Johnson, the creator of the first great English dictionary, a titan of logic and reason. The investigation is a scene of high farce and Enlightenment rigor. Dr. Johnson and his committee cram themselves into the small, dark bedroom. They order the girl Elizabeth to be put to bed. They command her to hold her hands and feet outside the covers. They then solemnly address the empty air, demanding that the ghost make its presence known. Silence. The ghost refuses to perform for the skeptical committee. But Johnson and his colleagues are not so easily fooled. Their suspicions now firmly fixed on the young girl, they take her to another house, away from her father. They tell her that if the noises don't start again, they will send her father to prison. And then, in the middle of the night, she is caught. Not communicating with a spirit, but with a small, thin piece of wood, about 6 inches long, concealed on her person. She had been creating the ghostly knocks and scratches by tapping the board against the bed frame or the wall, hidden under the covers. The entire haunting was a fraud, a cruel and calculated deception orchestrated by the father, William Parsons, to ruin the reputation of his financial rival. He had forced his own young daughter to be the star performer in his ghostly play. The trial was a public spectacle. Parsons was convicted and put in the stocks, where he was pelted with refuse by the very same London crowds that had once flocked to his haunted house. The Cock Lane ghost became a byword for gullibility and fraud. It was a classic ghost story, but the only thing being haunted was the truth. This was a lie that tried to create a phantom of the past. But what about a lie that creates a phantom of the future? A proof of ancient astronauts, carved not by a spirit, but by a prankster with a chisel and a sense of humor. Story number 28, The Spaceman Who Landed on a Cathedral. The Cock Lane ghost was a lie, designed to frame a man, a phantom conjured for a malicious purpose. This next story is about a very different kind of phantom, a phantom not from the past, but from the future. A lie carved in stone, not out of malice, but out of mischief, that accidentally became a global icon for one of the 20th century's most enduring and imaginative conspiracy theories. Let us travel to the ancient university city of Salamanca in western Spain. At its heart stands the new cathedral, a towering masterpiece of Gothic and Baroque architecture. Its construction began in the 1500s and continued for over 200 years. Its ornate stone facade is a dense tapestry of carvings, saints, gargoyles, biblical scenes, and intricate floral patterns. It is a stone encyclopedia of the faith and artistry of a bygone era. Now, fast forward to the 1990s. The age of the internet is dawning, and a photograph begins to circulate, first in magazines and then virally online. It is a picture of the entrance to the Salamanca Cathedral, and there, nestled amongst the ancient carvings of saints and devils, is something utterly baffling, something that could not possibly be there. It is a detailed carving of a modern astronaut. The figure is unmistakable. It is wearing a bulky spacesuit with a helmet, a breathing apparatus on its chest, and thick, treaded boots. It is a perfect, detailed representation of a 20th century space traveler, carved into the facade of a 500-year-old cathedral. For the burgeoning world of UFO enthusiasts and ancient astronaut theorists, this was the ultimate proof: the smoking gun. How could this be explained? It was impossible. It had to mean that the original builders of the cathedral, back in the 16th or 17th century, had either been visited by aliens in spacesuits or had possessed some psychic vision of the future. The Salamanca astronaut became a pilgrimage site, a piece of hard, tangible evidence for paleo contact, the idea that aliens had visited our ancestors. It was featured in books, documentaries, and countless websites as undeniable proof of a secret history. The mystery of the ancient astronaut of Salamanca was a beautiful, tantalizing puzzle, and the solution was beautifully simple. In 1992, the cathedral was undergoing a major restoration project. One of the stonemasons working on the facade, a man named Miguel Romero, was following a long-standing tradition among cathedral restorers. For centuries, it has been a custom for craftsmen, when restoring a cathedral, to add a small, anonymous carving of something contemporary, a signature of their own time, hidden within the original design. It's a playful nod to the future, a way of saying, "We were here." So, as he was repairing a damaged section of the entrance, Miguel Romero decided to carve an astronaut. It was a symbol of the 20th century, the great age of space exploration. He didn't do it to fool anyone. He did it as a joke, a signature, a continuation of a centuries-old tradition. He also carved a gargoyle eating an ice cream cone on another part of the building. But the story of the restorer's prank was much less exciting than the story of ancient aliens. The photograph began to circulate without its context, and in the fertile soil of the internet, the lie, or rather the misunderstanding, took on a life of its own. It became a modern myth. Even today, after the story has been thoroughly debunked, the Salamanca astronaut remains a prime piece of evidence in the world of pseudoscience. It's a perfect example of how a simple joke, stripped of its context, can be transformed into a profound mystery. This was a lie that created a false mystery in a real place. But what about a lie that is a real mystery in a fake place? A mystery that has cost millions of dollars and several lives, all in the pursuit of a treasure that was probably never there to begin with. Story number 29, the treasure map that was a sinkhole. The Salamanca astronaut is a lie that created a false mystery. It's a joke that got out of hand. But this next story is about a mystery that created a lie. A strange, alluring puzzle that has been sucking in money, hope, and even human lives for over 2 centuries. All based on the belief in a treasure that almost certainly does not exist. Let's go to a small, windswept, and completely unremarkable speck of land off the coast of Nova Scotia, Canada. It's called Oak Island, and since the year 1795, it has been the site of the world's longest and most expensive treasure hunt. The story begins, as all good treasure stories do, with a boy. A teenager named Daniel McGinnis saw strange lights on the island. He went to investigate and found a curious circular depression in the ground. Directly above it, an old oak tree had a branch that had been sawed off, and on the branch were the marks of a tackle block and pulley. To the boy, the conclusion was obvious. Pirates had used this spot to lower something heavy into the ground. It was buried treasure. He and 2 friends started digging. A few feet down, they hit a layer of stone flagstones. 10 feet further, they hit a platform of oak logs. 10 feet below that, another platform. It was clear that this was not a natural formation. Someone had built something here, something deep and elaborate. They had found what would become known as the Money Pit. And for the next 220-plus years, that's where the story has stayed. The promise of what lies at the bottom of that pit has become a multi-generational obsession. Dozens of syndicates and companies have been formed. Millions upon millions of dollars have been spent. Sophisticated drilling equipment, excavators, and divers have been brought in. And every single attempt has ended in failure and frustration. Because the Money Pit is not just a hole, it's a trap. As the diggers get deeper, the shaft is suddenly flooded with seawater. Early searchers discovered a series of ingenious booby traps, underground channels deliberately constructed to connect the pit to the nearby ocean. The moment the treasure is supposedly within reach, these channels are triggered and the pit fills with water. The legend grew. Who could have built such a complex structure? The theories became wilder and wilder. Was it the treasure of the pirate Captain Kidd? Was it the lost jewels of Marie Antoinette? Was it a secret vault built by the Knights Templar to hide the Holy Grail itself? One searcher even found a stone tablet with a mysterious inscription which, when translated, supposedly read, 40 feet below, 2 million pounds lie buried. It is a perfect mystery. A story of pirates, Templars, and ingenious traps. It has everything. Except, most likely, a treasure. The modern, boring, and almost certainly correct explanation is that the Oak Island Money Pit is a completely natural geological formation. The island is riddled with limestone and gypsum, and the area is a perfect example of a karst topography. The pit is likely just a natural sinkhole. The log platforms found by early diggers were probably just natural debris that had fallen into the hole over centuries. The ingenious booby trap tunnels? Natural fissures in the rock that allow water to flow in and out. The mysterious inscribed stone? It conveniently disappeared in the early 1900s and was most likely a hoax created to drum up investment. The Oak Island mystery is a lie we have told ourselves. It's a collective act of confirmation bias on a grand scale. For over 2 centuries, people have been pouring their fortunes and their lives, 6 men have died in the search, into a natural sinkhole because the story of a pirate's treasure is infinitely more compelling than the story of geology. It is a mystery that has become a self-perpetuating deception, a legend that is now far too valuable to ever be solved. The Oak Island lie is a story we want to believe about the past. But what about a lie that rewrites the past to give its creator a divine right to the present? A lie that, when discovered, became the foundation for one of the best-selling novels of all time.
Story number 30. The King Who Was His Own Ancestor. The mystery of Oak Island is a lie that fuels a treasure hunt, a story we tell ourselves about a hidden past. This final story is about a man who didn't just tell a lie about the past, he actively, painstakingly, and brilliantly invented a past, all to prove that he was not just a man, but the inheritor of a sacred, hidden legacy. A lie that, in its modern incarnation, would captivate the entire world. Let's go to France in the 1950s. The man at the center of our story is Pierre Plantard. He is a quiet, unassuming draftsman, but he possesses a grand and secret ambition. He doesn't just want to be important, he wants to be royal. He wants to be the rightful king of France. The only problem is that France is a republic, and he has no legitimate claim to any throne. So, he decided to create one. Plantard embarked on one of the most complex, patient, and bizarre historical hoaxes ever conceived. He claimed to be the direct descendant of the Merovingian kings, a dynasty of Frankish rulers who had been deposed back in the 7th century. But he didn't just claim it, he set out to prove it by manufacturing the evidence. His masterpiece of deception was the creation of a secret society. He called it the Priory of Sion. According to the story he concocted, this was an ancient, powerful cabal that had existed for centuries, dedicated to protecting the secrets of the Merovingian bloodline. He claimed its past Grand Masters included some of the most famous names in history: Leonardo da Vinci, Isaac Newton, Victor Hugo. And then, Plantard began to plant his proof. He and his accomplices meticulously forged a series of historical documents. They created fake genealogies, coded parchments, and fabricated histories of the priory. They then took these documents and, with incredible audacity, secretly deposited them into the Bibliothèque Nationale, the National Library of France in Paris. They hid their forgeries amongst the real historical archives, where they knew they would eventually be discovered by researchers. And in the 1960s, they were. A group of English authors, researching a book about a local French mystery, stumbled upon Plantard's planted documents. They took them at face value. Here was evidence of a secret society that had guarded a secret for centuries. And what was that secret? They came to a stunning conclusion, one that went even beyond Plantard's original monarchist ambitions. The Merovingian kings, they proposed, were not just kings. They were the direct descendants of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene, who had married and had a child. This story, born from Pierre Plantard's forged documents in the French National Library, became the basis for the 1982 bestseller, The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. The book was a global phenomenon. It presented the story of the Priory of Sion and the sacred bloodline of Jesus as a non-fiction historical investigation. And years later, this very same lie, this same web of manufactured history, would become the central plot device for one of the best-selling novels of all time, Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code. Think about the journey of that lie. It began with the quiet, personal ambition of a French draftsman. It was laundered into fact by being planted in a national archive. It was then amplified into a global conspiracy theory by a non-fiction book. And finally, it was immortalized as one of the great plot twists in modern popular fiction. Millions upon millions of people now know the name of the Priory of Sion. They know the story of the sacred bloodline. And almost none of them know that the entire thing was a hoax invented in the 1950s by a man who just really wanted to be king. It is perhaps the perfect modern deception, a lie that has become so famous as a story that its origins as a lie have been almost completely forgotten. That was the final entry, the 30th story. We have reached the end of this particular archive, closing the file on a man who tried to forge a divine right to rule. From a lie that built an empire on paper to a lie that became a global fictional phenomenon, we have seen how deception, in all its forms, has shaped our world in ways we rarely imagine. The archives are now quiet, but they are never truly empty. History is always waiting to tell its most unbelievable stories to those who are willing to listen.